Welcome back to another episode of Addicted to Gear. Today we're going to be looking at speaker upgrades and whether or not it's worth the effort. I've been known to be a tinkerer, and I've always really enjoyed trying to optimize the gear that I have. And I don't usually leave well enough alone. If I buy a guitar, oftentimes I'll end up upgrading some components, maybe the pickups, the tone knobs, different things. If I buy an amplifier, I tend to maybe swap out the tubes, get some tubes that are a little bit different, more to my liking. And one of the biggest tonal upgrades you can make for an amplifier is the speaker. And I've often been asked to talk about it, so I figured I'd take a couple of minutes to go over this with you today for people that are interested in exploring this kind of modification. And one of the main questions I've always been asked is it worth the money and the trouble to upgrade your speaker? And I would say, if any of you have watched my previous videos, you'll know that I've done this a couple of times already. And I've upgraded a PV Classic 30. You can see that video. I've upgraded a Blues Junior. I pretty much modified the entire thing. I changed the cabinet, the reverb tank, and the speakers. I've gone from a one speaker cabinet to a two speaker cabinet on that one, and I really like it. And so if you ask me, my opinion would be kind of simple. If you enjoy the amplifier that you already have, you like it, and there's maybe just a tonal characteristic that you don't necessarily fully enjoy. In other words, what do I mean by that? I'll elaborate a little bit. Say you have a Fender amplifier and you really like the high-end sparkle, but maybe it gets a little bit flubby in the low end when you're playing something that's a little bit heavier. Well, you can live with that, or you can try and get something that will compromise a little bit and maybe give you those highs, or maybe just a little bit below the highs that you're used to, and try and augment the quality of the lower frequencies. Now, alternatively, oftentimes, for example, Fender amplifiers are known to be a little bit spiky. So maybe those tones, those high-end tones, are what is bothering you about that amplifier, but you like everything else about it. Now, instead of selling the amplifier, if you like it overall, you can pretty much tweak the tonality, the tonal characteristics of that amplifier just by upgrading the speaker, modifying it, and changing it. Now, there's a lot of options when it comes to speakers. Obviously, the well-known companies are Celestion, Eminence, Guitar Warehouse speakers are quite popular. There's a host of manufacturers out there, and each one has a product line that really pretty much covers the gamut. So it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint what it is that you need, and that's where the idea of modifying your speakers becomes a little bit touchier, because one could pretty much experiment with a host of different speakers, and it becomes quite expensive if you don't know what you're looking for. And reading forums, for example, is kind of tricky. I wouldn't recommend it. I could tell you to read the forums to get a general idea in terms of direction to move in, but you really need to hear the speaker yourself, because some people are not very well versed in trying to accurately describe in words what a speaker sounds like. It's open to interpretation, depending on what cabinet, what room they're using it in, what kind of effects they're using, what kind of music they're playing, what kind of guitar or instrument is plugged into that particular amplifier. There's so many X factors that can change the characteristics of a cabinet and a speaker that is really hard to pinpoint and say, well, just because this guy likes it and he says it's 4 out of 5 stars or 5 out of 5 stars on a review means it's the one for me. That's not necessarily true. I would strongly recommend that you try and listen to the speaker that you're looking for, if you can, in the same type of cabinet as well. Because when you're playing with a speaker in an open back cabinet as opposed to a closed back cabinet, that will change the characteristic of the speaker tremendously. If you're playing a speaker in a 1x12 and all of a sudden you're going into a mixed 2x12 or maybe a 4x12, that's also going to change the characteristic of the speaker. The size of the speaker will change as well, and the ohms that are used in the speaker will also affect tonality. So all these things come into play when you're trying to choose a specific amplifier, a specific speaker for that amplifier, I'm trying to say. So you want to be open-minded and you want to be able to try as many speakers as you can to be able to get the gist of what you're after. It's a difficult thing to do. It's not easy. I mean, not everybody carries all the speakers that you're looking for. You might not be able to find the particular speaker that you're after. Sometimes you have to order them. So you don't want to mess up. You don't want to be ordering 4 or 5 different speakers and then not end up liking any of them, because that becomes rather costly. So you really want to try to narrow it down. You can also try and use the professional advice from the manufacturer by sending them an email and trying to describe to them what you're after, what you're trying to achieve for your particular cabinet. If you're trying to tame the highs or maybe tighten up the lows, or depending on the characteristics of the amplifier that you currently have, they might be able to actually point you in a better direction. Now, for me, the reason I bought this speaker, and this speaker here is a Celestion Type A. I'll try to put it in the right direction so you can see. And this speaker is a relatively new speaker. It hasn't been around for that long. And it's a 50-watt speaker. And I'm using this speaker to go into a Fender Supersonic 22. And the reason why I'm doing that, I have a Fender Supersonic 22, which I really like. The Fender Supersonic 22 is basically, I would kind of describe it as a Fender Deluxe, kind of on steroids in terms of the gain channel that it has. It has a double cascading gain option on it. And it has some features that the standard Deluxe reverb doesn't have, such as the effects loop and whatnot. And I really like the Supersonic. I think it's a super, no pun intended, a super sounding amplifier. It has a lot of the characteristics that I need and it plays wonderfully. The only thing I'm trying to do is try to make the gain channel sound a little bit tighter, because let's be honest, there's no one amplifier that's going to be able to do it all. If there was, everyone would be using it, right? And really, what somebody's after in terms of tonality is quite unique. What I like is not necessarily what the next person's going to like, or what kind of music I play is not necessarily the same as somebody else's, and the style in which I play that music is not going to be the same. What I mean by that is, if I'm a heavy hitter, if I really like to pound it out, that will change the characteristics of the tone and the way you play the music. So definitely swapping a speaker can get you closer to that tone that you're after. The Supersonic Reverb is not a cheap amplifier. I mean, it's above $1,000, and it's well worth it, to me anyway, to be able to swap out with a speaker that's maybe like 130 bucks. This is not a super expensive speaker. So it's maybe like 10% the cost of the amplifier. So spending 10% to upgrade the speaker on the amplifier, for me, is well worth it. I mean, worst comes to worst, if it really works and I like it, I keep this speaker in the cabinet. I take the existing speaker out, either use it in a different cabinet for something else, or maybe sell it and recuperate like 80 bucks. So at the end of it, this speaker upgrade might end up costing me like $30. It's not an extremely expensive thing to do, but if you do get more enjoyment out of your amplifier by making the upgrade, I feel it's well worth it. One thing to keep in mind with speaker upgrades is don't make a rash judgment. Give it time to break in. Normally, speakers that are brand new will change in terms of their sound. It takes quite a few hours of actually playing the speaker for it to mellow out and give you its true tonal representation, in other words, to break in. The best way of breaking in a speaker would be to install the speaker into your amplifier and to play it at a relatively loud volume for, I'd say, at least 30 hours if you can. You can do this at home when you're not around. You can take the amplifier and maybe put some pillows in front of it, pump up the bass on it a little bit, and just take a looper, like a ditto looper, play something heavy into it, and just make it play while you're at work. So, you know, within a few days, your speaker will be broken in and you'll have a better representation, because I've tried speakers in the past that I've put in my cabinets, and I felt they were a little bit too harsh or too spiky, and they definitely mellowed out over time and sounded much better. So I'd say if you already like the speaker when you first put it in, it'll only get better as it matures. So give it some time. Don't make a rash judgment and pull it out the next day and just sell it. Give it some time before you actually make up your mind whether or not it's a keeper or not. So overall, I think that this new Celestion A type speaker is going to be an interesting speaker swap for me. I haven't tried it. I've been experimenting with Guitar Warehouse speakers for quite a while, and I do like a lot of their models, but I decided to try this one. Why? Because A, they were getting some really good feedback. A lot of people were talking about this speaker, and a lot of people claim to like this speaker in the Fender Supersonic specifically. The characteristics of the speaker, as far as I know, is that the high ends are really there. They're really nicely defined, and it does tighten up the lower end as well. So it's exactly what I'm looking for. Whether or not I'll like it more than the stock speaker, that remains to be seen. But I'm going to be putting it in, and so in the next couple of videos you should see that. I'm going to be modifying that particular amplifier, putting this speaker into it. I'm going to give it some time to break in, and then I'm going to compare the old speaker, the Eminence Wizard, and this speaker. And then you can help me decide which one you think sounds better. And maybe at that point, we'll decide which one we want to keep. So that could be an interesting video that I'll follow up with shortly. So I want you guys to stay tuned and give me your feedback once the actual swap has been made. If you have some comments regarding the Celestion Type A speaker, give me some feedback. I'd be interesting to hear from you if you've already tried it into a Supersonic and what you feel it either gave you as a bonus tone, or maybe it wasn't right for you and what you feel about it not being right. Maybe you found something else that suits your particular tastes better. Either way, I'd like to hear your comments on this speaker, and give me your comments on what you'd like to see me reviewing and talking about next, because I do have a lot of things that I'm reviewing currently for you guys. But if there's something specific that you want me to do first, I'm more than happy to be able to do that for you if I can. So give me your thumbs up or thumbs down if you like this video, if you like the information that I'm presenting here. And if you have comments about this speaker, modifying your speakers in your cabinet, modifying your guitar amplifiers, you want to know more, definitely give me your comments below. I'm happy to answer your questions. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do, because there's more great stuff coming your way. And I want you to stay tuned and keep rocking.